I saw my daughter-in-law toss a leather suitcase into the lake, and then I heard it cry. The sound was faint, almost lost in the whisper of October wind, but I swear to you, it was there. A soft, broken wail that didn't belong in this world. My heart froze. My breath caught somewhere between disbelief and horror. The lake swallowed the suitcase whole, ripples spreading across its surface like shivers down my spine. It was 5:15 in the evening. I remember because I had just looked at the clock in my car before stepping out to stretch my legs. The sun was bleeding into the horizon, turning the water copper and gold. I was parked near the edge of Lake Marin, a quiet spot I visited often after my son Louis died. It was supposed to be peaceful, healing. But that evening, peace had packed up and left. That's when I saw Cynthia, my daughter-in-law. Her silver car came tearing down the narrow dirt road, tires spitting gravel, engine screaming like something was chasing her. She slammed the brakes so hard the front bumper dipped. Then she jumped out, hair messy, gray dress wrinkled, eyes wild like she hadn't slept in days. She didn't notice me standing behind the trees. I thought maybe she'd lost her control of herself again. She'd been acting strange for weeks, disappearing for hours, avoiding my calls, lying about where she'd been. But when she yanked open the back door of her car and dragged out that brown leather suitcase, something in my gut twisted. It was too heavy, too deliberate. She carried it like a burden she couldn't wait to be rid of. She walked right to the edge of the lake. My instinct told me to call out, but before the words could leave my lips, she hurled that suitcase into the water with both hands. It hit with a dull thud, splashing high, and then it sank. The sound that followed still haunts me, a muffled cry, fragile, human, like a baby's voice trapped behind thick walls. I ran. My body moved before my mind caught up. The ground was wet, slippery, but I didn't care. My shoes sank in the mud, my breath sharp in my chest. "Cynthia!" I screamed, but she was already backing away, pale, trembling, muttering something under her breath that I couldn't hear. And then she ran. She jumped into her car and sped off, leaving only tire tracks and my heart pounding in the silence she left behind. For a second, I just stood there, frozen, my hand shaking, my mind racing. What if I was wrong? What if my ears deceived me? But then another tiny muffled sound came from beneath the water. That was all it took. I stumbled forward, wading into the lake, the cold biting through my clothes. My fingers gripped the edge of that suitcase. It was heavy, almost dragging me under. I prayed out loud, "God, please, please let me be wrong." The zipper was jammed, swollen from the water, but I tore it open with my nails, desperate. Inside, wrapped in a soaked blanket, was a newborn baby. His skin was pale blue, his lips trembling, his tiny chest rising so weakly I thought it might stop any second. My body went numb. "Louis," I whispered, because somehow I knew this was his child, my grandson. I screamed for help, but the lake was silent, the woods empty. My phone was back in the car, so I pressed that fragile baby against my chest and ran. I don't even remember the path, only the sound of my own sobs and the baby's faint, wet breaths. When I reached the car, my hands were trembling so badly I could barely dial 911. The operator's voice was calm, but mine wasn't. "He's cold. He's not breathing right," I cried. She told me to remove the wet blanket, to wrap him in something dry. My jacket was all I had. I wrapped him tight and kept rubbing his tiny arms and legs, whispering, "Stay with me, baby. Please stay with me." When the sirens finally cut through the night, I broke down. Paramedics pulled the baby from my arms, and I saw one of them shake his head. Too cold, too weak. But the other started CPR. Time froze as they worked, the sound of machines replacing my heartbeat. I kept praying, my hands clasped, whispering my son's name like it would make his child stronger. The baby survived that night. Barely. They said he had severe hypothermia and water aspiration. He was in the NICU before I even knew his name. But I did know one thing. Cynthia had tried to kill him, and that thought burned a hole through my chest so deep I could hardly breathe. My son had died only months ago, and now this? Detective Fatima Salazar showed up the next morning. Sharp eyes, soft voice. She said they were investigating. They'd found tire tracks matching Cynthia's car near the lake. My statement confirmed the timing, but here's the part that shook me. Fatima said Cynthia claimed she'd been shopping across town at that exact hour, and she had a receipt and supermarket footage to prove it. For a moment, I questioned myself. Could I have imagined it? Could grief and exhaustion have twisted my memory? But no, that sound, that cry, no mother could mistake it. I knew what I saw. Fatima looked at me like she wanted to believe, but the evidence was thin. Still, she promised to dig deeper. That night, I sat beside the baby's incubator and cried silently. I thought about Louis, my sweet boy with his soft smile and patient heart. He had trusted Cynthia, loved her despite everything. Now he was gone, and she had tried to destroy the only piece of him left in this world. I touched the glass and whispered, "I'll protect you, no matter what it takes." And I meant it. That was the night I decided if the police couldn't bring her down, I would. But revenge wasn't a flame, it was ice. Slow, deliberate, waiting for its moment to crack everything open. The next morning, I woke up in a hospital chair, stiff and aching, with the rhythmic beeping of machines echoing in my ears. The baby, my grandson, was still fighting for his life. The nurses said his chances had improved overnight, but his tiny body had a long way to go. They told me his name tag said Baby Doe, but I already knew what I'd call him, Hector. Louis had always loved that name. Detective Fatima returned later that afternoon. She had questions, a lot of them. Where had I been? Why was I at the lake? What made me follow Cynthia? I could tell she was torn between disbelief and sympathy. But there was one question that froze my blood. "Mrs. Adair," she said gently, "did you know your son's death wasn't an accident?" I stared at her, numb. "What are you saying?" My voice cracked. Fatima opened her folder and slid a photo across the table. It was Louis's car, or what was left of it, crumpled on the highway. She said the brake lines were cut. We found traces of hydraulic fluid and tool marks. Someone tampered with it. I felt my knees weaken. My son hadn't just died. He'd been murdered. Every part of me wanted to scream. Cynthia had been driving behind him that day. I remember her crocodile tears at the funeral, her trembling hands clutching Hector's ultrasound photo, her soft whisper. He was everything to me. I believed her. God help me, I had comforted her. And now I was realizing I'd been hugging the woman who killed my son. Fatima continued, her voice low. "We're still building the case, but there's more. We found a DNA match confirming the baby is your biological grandson." My eyes filled again. "Louis's son," I whispered. "Then that means—" Fatima nodded. "Yes, Cynthia gave birth just weeks ago. But why try to kill her own child? That question tormented me as I sat in that cold hospital room. I replayed every memory, the sudden change in her behavior after Lewis's death, the money that disappeared, the calls she took behind closed doors. I started seeing patterns I had ignored. Greed, lies, fear. It wasn't madness, it was calculation. 2 days later, Fatima called. She said, "We found something, a bank record. Lewis changed his will right before he died. Everything was to go to his unborn child." I felt my stomach drop. Cynthia would get nothing unless the child didn't survive. That was her motive. Money. She killed my son and tried to finish what she started by drowning his baby. I drove home that night, though my house didn't feel like home anymore. Every corner reminded me of Lewis, his graduation photo, his laughter echoing faintly in my memory, the smell of his cologne still clinging to his old jacket. I pressed that jacket to my face and cried until my voice was gone. But beneath that grief, something else was growing, a fire. The next morning, I called a lawyer. I wanted custody of Hector. I didn't care how long it took, how many forms I had to sign, how many judges I had to convince. I was not letting him go to foster care, not when he was all I had left of my son. But the system didn't care about process. Background checks, home visits, psychological evaluations. Every day felt like another test of my patience and faith. One of the social workers, a young woman named Eloise, tried to help me. She was kind but firm. "You have to stay calm, Mrs. Adair. They need to see you're stable." Stable. As if any mother could stay stable after watching her family be torn apart. But I swallowed my anger and did everything by the book. Parenting classes, therapy sessions, home safety checks. I passed every one. Meanwhile, Cynthia vanished. The police issued a warrant, but she was gone. Her phone disconnected, her apartment empty. Fatima says she might have crossed state lines. Still, I could feel her shadow everywhere. I started locking my doors twice, checking my windows every night. Some part of me knew she wasn't finished. One night, around midnight, my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then answered. "You think you've won?" A voice hissed. It was her, Cynthia. "That baby should have died. He's a curse." My hands trembled so hard the phone nearly slipped. I wanted to scream, to curse her name, but I forced myself to speak calmly. "You'll never touch him again, Cynthia." And she laughed, a cold, hollow laugh that didn't sound human. "We'll see." Then the line went dead. I called Fatima immediately, and by morning, the police had traced the call. It came from a payphone near an abandoned warehouse outside town. Fatima set up surveillance, hoping to lure her back. But days passed, then weeks. No sign. It was as if Cynthia had melted into the air. Still, I didn't relax. I kept praying, sleeping in short bursts, always waiting for that knock on the door. When Hector was finally stable enough to come home, the hospital let me take him under temporary custody. He was so small, smaller than any baby I'd ever held. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw Lewis there. The same gentle spark, the same warmth. It gave me purpose again. I whispered, "You're safe now, my love. You're home." But peace never lasts long in stories like mine. A week later, Fatima called again. She said, "We found her car, silver sedan, registered to Cynthia, parked behind an old motel. She's nearby." My heart started racing. "You'll catch her, right?" I asked. There was a pause. "We'll try, Mrs. Adair, but she's dangerous. Please don't do anything alone." That night, as I rocked Hector to sleep, I thought about what Fatima said. Dangerous. The word echoed. I'd faced danger before. Poverty, loss, death, but nothing scared me more than the thought of losing this baby. I swore right there under that soft nursery light that if Cynthia came near us again, I'd be ready. 3 weeks passed in uneasy calm. Hector was growing stronger every day, his cheeks filling out, his skin turning a healthy brown. I'd sing him lullabies in the quiet hours of the night, even when fear kept my throat tight. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see that suitcase sinking beneath the lake again, the sound of his muffled cry haunting the edges of my dreams. But beneath that gentle routine, I could feel something building, like a storm on the horizon. Fatima kept updating me. They were finding more evidence, tracing Cynthia's bank accounts, uncovering offshore transfers, over $200,000 in insurance money from Lewis's death. She had moved it all before the accident. That confirmed it for me. My son hadn't just been a casualty of greed. He was executed for it. One evening, I caught sight of a car parked across the street, silver, the same model Cynthia drove, that stayed there for nearly an hour, headlights off. My pulse hammered in my ears. I picked up Hector, locked the doors, and called Fatima. "She's watching us," I whispered. By the time officers arrived, the car was gone. But on my porch rail, I found something. A single baby sock, wet from rain. That was when fear became fury. I realized I couldn't just wait for justice. I had to make it happen. Cynthia was clever, manipulative, and ruthless, but I had one advantage she didn't. She underestimated me. I spent my life being the quiet one, the soft one, the woman who smiled through pain. She thought I'd stay in my place, but she didn't know what kind of fire a mother's love could light. The next morning, I went to see Fatima in person. "I need you to use me," I told her. She frowned. "Use you?" "As bait," I said. "You know she's watching me. Let her think she's safe to come close again." Fatima hesitated, her eyes scanning my face like she was reading a dangerous thought. "Mrs. Adair, this isn't your fight." I looked her dead in the eyes. It became my fight the moment she threw my grandson into that lake. Fatima finally agreed to set a trap. They placed surveillance around my home, unmarked cars, plainclothes officers, hidden cameras. I felt both exposed and protected. I made it look like life had gone back to normal. Groceries, doctor's visits, park walks with Hector. But every step I took, I felt her eyes on me. Somewhere out there, Cynthia was watching, waiting. Days went by. Nothing. Then one night, as I was rocking Hector to sleep, the power went out. Total darkness swallowed the house. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered with shaking hands. "Hello?" A whisper came through the static. "You can't keep him forever." My blood turned to ice. I said, "Cynthia." Silence. Then faintly, the sound of a baby crying. Not Hector's voice, but a recording. The line cut. I rushed to check the security cameras, but they were dead, wires cut cleanly. I ran to the window, my heart pounding so loud I thought it might wake the baby. Then a shadow moved across the yard. A figure, slim, familiar. I ducked down, holding Hector tight. Through the thin curtain, I saw her, Cynthia, standing under the streetlight, watching the house. I called Fatima, whispering every word. Within minutes, police cars flooded the streets, sirens blaring. But by the time they reached the yard, Cynthia was gone again, like smoke. She was playing with me, taunting me, testing how far I'd go to protect him. And I realized then, she didn't just want to take Hector, she wanted to destroy me first. The next few days were a blur of fear and planning. Fatima moved me and Hector into a safe house under protective custody. But even there, I couldn't sleep. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. hearing phantom footsteps, imagining her shadow creeping closer. The officers told me to rest. How could I? My son's killer was still breathing, still free. One afternoon, Eloise, the nurse who'd helped at the hospital, came by to check on Hector. She brought milk, blankets, and something I didn't expect. Kindness. "He's lucky to have you," she said softly. "You saved him twice." Her words broke me. I hadn't realized how close I'd been to losing everything until then. But kindness only strengthened my resolve. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing. Fatima called that evening with news that changed everything. She said, "We've located her. An informant spotted Cynthia near the old shipping warehouses outside town. She's armed, but we're moving in tonight." I felt my breath catch. "Let me come." "Absolutely not," Fatima snapped. "You stay put." But after the call ended, I knew I wouldn't. I had waited too long for justice to hide now. That night, I left Hector with Eloise, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "I'll be back, my love. Grandma's got something to finish." I drove out under the pale moon, the air thick with fog. Every mile closer to those warehouses felt like another step into my own fate. I wasn't sure what I'd find there, but I knew who I was now. I wasn't a grieving widow anymore. I was a mother seeking vengeance. When I reached the site, I parked behind a cluster of rusted containers. Police lights glimmered faintly in the distance, but I didn't move toward them. Instead, I followed the sound of voices, low, hurried, and angry. I recognized that voice immediately. Cynthia. My heartbeat thundered. This was it. I peeked around the corner and saw her. She was thinner, wilder, eyes darting in every direction, a gun trembling in her hand. She looked nothing like the woman who once smiled in family photos beside my son. She was a ghost, and I had come to bury her story once and for all. I could hear the faint hum of the generators, the metallic drip of water leaking from the ceiling, and the crunch of my boots against the gravel floor. The old warehouse loomed around me like a hollow skeleton, rusted beams, shattered glass, and forgotten echoes. Somewhere in that maze of shadows, Cynthia was hiding. My palms were slick with sweat, but my resolve was ice cold. I ducked behind a stack of crates and watched her pace back and forth near an abandoned forklift. Her hair was wild, her mascara streaked like war paint. She was muttering to herself, fragments of words, pieces of a mind unraveling. "He's mine. He's all I have left." Her voice cracked on that last word, and for a fleeting moment, I almost pitied her. But then I remembered the lake, the suitcase, the sound of that helpless cry. The sound of footsteps echoed from the other side, officers moving in. I saw their flashlights sweep across the far end of the warehouse. Cynthia froze, eyes wide, like a trapped animal. "No!" she screamed. Then she fired. The gunshot ripped through the air, deafening in the emptiness. I dropped low, heart pounding in my ears. The officers shouted commands, but Cynthia darted behind machinery, wild and desperate. Before I could think, I was moving, crawling between crates, closing the distance. I didn't know what I'd do when I reached her, but instinct guided me. When I came up behind her, she was reloading with shaking hands. I spoke her name softly. "Cynthia?" She spun around, eyes wide, the barrel of her gun swinging toward me. You ruined everything." "I didn't ruin anything," I said quietly, my voice trembling but steady. "You did that when you killed my son." She laughed, a broken, hollow sound.
He was leaving me. He was going to take Hector. What was I supposed to do, huh? Watch everything slip away? You could have walked away, but you chose to drown a baby. Her face twisted with something between rage and sorrow. He wasn't supposed to cry, she whispered. I thought it'd be quick. You thought? I stepped closer. You thought you could bury your mistakes and no one would find out? But he cried, Cynthia. He cried because even in that moment, he wanted to live. Suddenly, the sound of shattering glass cut through the air. A spotlight burst in from the far wall as police breached the other side. Drop the weapon, Fatima's voice echoed through a megaphone. Cynthia screamed again, waving the gun wildly between me and the lights. Don't come any closer, she shrieked. Cynthia, I said softly, keeping my eyes locked on hers. Her hand trembled. You think you're better than me? No, I whispered. I just think I loved him more. She flinched, and in that split second of hesitation, Fatima lunged from behind a beam, tackling her to the ground. The gun skittered across the concrete, sliding to my feet. Everything went still, except the ringing in my ears. I stared down at the weapon, the same kind she'd used that night. Fatima shouted orders as officers cuffed Cynthia, but I barely heard her. I picked up the gun, my reflection distorted in the cold metal. For one brief moment, the thought flickered, how easy it would be to end it right here. One squeeze, one heartbeat, justice without a courtroom. Mrs. Adair? Fatima's voice cut through the fog. Put it down. I looked at Cynthia, blood-smeared, sobbing, cursing the world that didn't bend for her. I saw not a monster, but an empty vessel, a woman destroyed by her own greed. I dropped the gun. It hit the floor with a hollow clang that echoed for what felt like forever. Fatima came over, gently placing a hand on my shoulder. It's over, she said. But she was wrong. It wasn't over. Not yet. Because no trial, no sentence could undo what had been done. My son was gone. My grandson would grow up never knowing his father. But I could make sure he knew the truth and that he knew his family fought for him. Weeks later, the trial made national headlines. Mother accused of infant attempted murder and spousal death. I sat through every day of it, every testimony, every lie, every flash of Cynthia's defiance breaking into tears. When the verdict finally came, guilty on all counts, I felt no joy, just quiet peace. Justice isn't sweet, it's solemn. That night, when I returned home, the house was silent. I stood by Hector's crib, watching him sleep, tiny fingers curled, breath steady. The moonlight spilled across his face, soft and pure. I whispered, "You're safe now." But a tear slipped down my cheek anyway, because safety, I realized, isn't the same as peace. Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I walked to the lake, the same one she'd tried to use as a grave. The water was calm that night, reflecting the stars like tiny silver eyes. I knelt at the edge, clutching a small locket. Inside was a photo of my son and Hector. I opened it, kissed it, and tossed it gently into the water. I said, "Rest now, both of you." And as I stood and turned to leave, I caught sight of my reflection rippling in the water, older, stronger, weathered by grief, but still standing. Maybe that was what vengeance really was. Not fire or fury, but survival.
It's been 2 years since that night at the lake, 2 years since I pulled that suitcase from the dark water and heard the faint, impossible cry that changed everything. People call me a hero. I don't see it that way. Heroes don't wake up shaking in the middle of the night. They don't stare out their windows wondering if the ghosts of the past are still watching. But I do. Every single night, I do. Hector's laughter fills this house now. It's strange how sound can heal. The first time he called me Nana, I cried so hard I had to step out of the room. He's walking, running, always reaching for things just out of his grasp. A toy, a bird outside the window, life itself. When I look at him, I see my son's eyes, the same spark, the same stubborn light. That's how I know Louis didn't die in vain. His love lives right here, in this little boy's heartbeat. Some nights, I still visit the lake, not because I'm haunted anymore, but because it reminds me of the line between life and loss. I stand where I once fell to my knees and whisper thank you to God, to fate, to whatever force kept Hector breathing that night. Maybe it was faith. Maybe it was love. Maybe they're the same thing. People ask if I ever forgave Cynthia. I wish I could say yes. I've tried. I've prayed for the strength to let go, but forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a slow, grinding process, and sometimes it's not even for them. It's for you. I no longer hate her. I don't have the energy to hate anymore. I just pity her. A woman who traded everything for greed and ended up with nothing but an empty cell. Detective Fatima still calls sometimes just to check in. She tells me Hector's case inspired new policies for child welfare response. Nurse Eloise sends photos of the hospital's new NICU, named in honor of baby Hector. Father Anthony comes by for tea on Sundays, saying the same thing each time. Your faith saved 2 souls that day. I smile and nod, but deep down I know faith didn't do it alone. Stubborn love did. We celebrated Hector's 2nd birthday last month. There was a big chocolate cake, too big for 2 people, but I didn't care. I sang, even though my voice cracked. He clapped and smeared frosting all over his cheeks. When he laughed, it was like sunlight breaking through the clouds that had hung over me for years. I realized then, revenge might have brought justice, but love brought peace. Sometimes I sit by the fireplace after he's asleep, watching the flames dance. I think about the suitcase, how something meant to end a life ended up saving 2. Life's funny that way. It doesn't just destroy, it rebuilds too. You just have to be willing to start again even when your hands are shaking. If you'd told me back then that I'd find peace after everything, I would have laughed in your face. But here I am, stronger, softer. Not the same woman I was, but someone who survived her own storm. And if you're listening right now, wondering if revenge will ever fill that emptiness inside you, be honest with yourself. Would you have waited this long for payback, or would you have chosen to fight for love instead? Because in the end, I learned this. Revenge may settle the score, but love keeps the story going.